Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, the show where we talk about disrupting the current marketing paradigm and changing it to a gentler approach, one that's based on empathy and kindness. I'm Sarah Croce. I'm the host on this show, and you know that you're in the right place if you are a heart-centered entrepreneur or change maker who's looking for a better way to market your business. Or you might also be a marketing impact pioneer. So someone who's working in an organization and you just know that there has to be a better way to connect with your audience. So without further ado, here's today's conversation on the show. Hey, Michelle, so good to speak to you again.
I know, Sarah. It's such an honor to be here. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, likewise. Really looking forward to this episode. So, when you first reached out to me, I was doing the happy dance. I'm like, oh, yeah, somebody else talking about you are like really talking about the bro marketing and how, that's all wrong. And I was like, yeah, exactly. But let's do more gentle marketing. So, really excited to talk to you about that. But first, I want to dive into the other thing that we noticed when I was a guest on your show. I noticed, we have the rebellion and revolution in common as well. So
hmm
I want you to tell my listeners a little bit about your rebellion and what's behind that.
Yeah. So I have a messaging framework called the 3 word rebellion, and it's really about creating this uncopyable, one of a kind message that is centered around the results or the change you want to create for your clients, your industry, or even the world. And I got the inspiration for this framework from social movements like Black Lives Matter, Me Too, March for Our Lives, and also from the entrepreneurs that I really loved and looked up to, people like Simon Sinek and Start With Why, or Mel
Mhm,
Robbins and the 5 Second Rule. And what
mhm,
I realized is like these two groups that are so different from each other, they do something in common, which is summarize the change they want to create in the world in just a few words. And I'm like, that is so interesting. I'm wondering if I could take questions that social movements ask themselves and apply it to the business owners I was working with to really help them find their core message. Because I believe after figuring out like what your offer is and who that offer goes to, figuring out how to talk about what it is you do in a way that gets people's attention, provokes their curiosity, it's so hard. So I took questions like, what are you rebelling against? What change do you want to create in the world? And I
mhm.
would just let my clients like free write, just dump all of their ideas out of their head and onto paper. And then I would take my qualitative research skills and start like looking at the themes and creating word banks. And what I found was it was like, oh, it's so much easier to find what that core message is that they want to be known for using this 3 word rebellion framework. So that is kind of how it all came together. Because before that, I was working in public speaking coaching, writing speeches, and I was always, this communication rebel. But when I figured out this framework, I'm like, yes, that is the thing that I want to be known for in the industry.
I love it. I love it so much. Yeah, it's the rebellion and it's finding that thing that you rebel against, right? In a way. So and then
Yeah.
summarizing that into 3 words, which it seems easy, but I'm sure that you've come across things where it's like, yeah, it's not that easy to just say something in only 3 words, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the more simplicity and succinct you are, the
Hmm.
more difficult and daunting the task. And the other thing I see is like my clients and business owners in general are so close to their work that
Hmm.
they tend to be very, very solution focused. Like, this is my solution. And this is, like,
Hmm.
I just want to talk about the solution. And I'm like, no, it's really about like, yeah, maybe we can come up with something creative to call your solution that draws people in, like the
Mhm.
three-word rebellion, but at the end of the day, it's really like, how do you want these people to change? We're in the business of transformation,
Right.
and that is super hard for people to summarize and get out of their own way and be able to see it.
Yeah. Well, obviously the elephant in the room is the gentle business revolution, as my listeners know that that's what I talk about. But I didn't know you before, when I really just had this epiphany one day. I'm like, I got to reserve that domain name. That's what we do as marketers. We run to the
Yes.
GoDaddy or whatever and reserve that domain name. And yeah, the revolution is really against business in my case,
Mhm.
saying, there can be another way to do business. Business doesn't have to be tough and aggressive. It can be gentle. Same thing with marketing, but we'll get into that in a moment. But yeah, I had
Yeah.
no idea. I was like following your framework before we even knew each other.
I know.
Yeah.
And I have a question for you, and I
Uh-huh.
know I'm turning the tables.
Go
But did
ahead.
you feel like once you found the gentle business revolution, like things kind of started clicking in your business and it really started coming together?
Totally. Yeah, totally. I'm like, that's what I was meant to do. And then
Mhm.
everything from there is like, oh, this makes sense. Everything started to make sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
and I
think
love
also
that.
the other thing is also, and you also talk about this, the community or the movement, right? Like you saw the social
Mhm.
movements, and then in business we kind of call it sometimes communities, sometimes movement. So what's the importance of that when you do the work with your clients, like
Yeah,
from
most of
this
my
perspective?
clients want to have some type of impact that is beyond them, that ripple effect of change. And for me, a movement, and most social movements start out really small. It's just a few people doing the work, getting the message out there. Like I think about Black Lives Matter, and that really started with a core small group of people advocating for it, and before it became this worldwide phenomenon that people are joining and actively participating in. And
Mhm.
with businesses, like we need people to know about us. We need other people to champion our work, especially when it's creating change in the world. And then the question really becomes is how do you get people excited to follow you, to join you, to be even like a mini leader in the movement you're creating? So for me, it goes beyond audience building and really captivating the hearts and minds of people so they feel like they're joining something that is bigger too. And I think that's why movement making is so important. It's just a higher level of commitment to your mission in the world when other people are joining you.
It's the sense of belonging that I think we're all craving now. It's like
Mm.
we don't just want to be a consumer anymore. We want to belong to something, and that goes for entrepreneurs and yeah, our customers, but also for bigger brands. I'm thinking like if you can come up with a brand that has some sense of belonging, those are the brands who are going to do well in the future. Wouldn't you
Oh,
agree?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And I think about brands like, I'm in Seattle, Washington, so REI is our big outdoor,
Hmm.
well, and it's national here, but they really do a great job of
Hmm.
creating belonging. And, if you love the outdoors, then most likely you shop at REI. Or I even think about things like Bombas socks, which are the socks of choice. But every time you buy them, you feel like you're doing something good for the world because
Right.
they're donating a pair of socks. And you're like, oh, I'm a part of this Bombas community. And so it's really cool to think about and really have and spend your money in alignment with your values, really.
Which made me think, I was just thinking, well, are movements always, striving towards something good? I guess there's bad movements as well, but like in this
Well,
context, we're definitely talking about
yeah. I'm using it for the power of good, because if you think
Yeah,
about it, like Donald Trump and Make America Great Again, that is a movement.
it's a
That is a
movement.
movement that is
Yeah.
not aligned with my values or what I
Mm-hmm.
want to see for my country, but it is movement.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because I use that as an example of a three-word rebellion in my book, Make America Great Again. But then I provide like the additional critique of like, well, who are we making America great again for? And it's like, oh, it's actually white people. It's not Black or brown people or LGBTQ or trans. It's really this white supremacist kind of slogan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the movement maker, obviously, they only want to attract their audience. And so they're selling them whatever they want to sell them, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
because the people who are attracted to that message, they believe that there was a time that America was better, that America was great. And so that message is super effective. I mean,
It's
Ronald
strong.
Reagan
Yeah.
used it first, like
Yeah.
he used it back in the 80s. But yeah, I mean, it just called to a longing and recognized their anger and really gave them a place to belong and channel that and be around people who are just like them and feeling that same way. And that's powerful, whether you agree with it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. Yeah. It really seems like you're saying like even presidents use this three-word rebellion. And if I think about it,
Yeah.
like, yeah, anything that kind of has power in the way it's communicated, it's two word, I guess the Me Too movement. Yeah,
It
it's
can be
two or
2
three
words, it's
words,
fine.
through
Yeah.
2 to 4 words, probably, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the book, I talk about it being 2 to 5 words, and,
Okay.
like, even in our last presidential election in the United States, Joe Biden had "Build Back Better." That
Mm.
I was just like, as soon as he said that, I was like, "That is an excellent three-word rebellion," because that's exactly what America needs to do. We need to build back, and it needs to be better than before. Like, that is perfect, like,
Yeah.
perfect for a candidate.
Right. It's interesting. Yeah, that I think it also shows because that Biden's movement didn't make it so much over here to Europe. So I guess it also depends how well you then communicate that message, right? If we think about marketing, yeah, it's one thing to have a three-word rebellion, but then you need to also really communicate around it. I mean, the fact that we didn't hear it over here in Europe tells me that he could have probably done a better job really talking about that.
Yeah,
Um,
and I feel like you will here because it's like the central piece of his infrastructure plan is to build back better. But I feel like also like this, I didn't mean to get so political, but like America's fallen in disrepair. So really that is a message for Americans to hear.
yeah,
And
everybody, not
it's
just one side,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's not necessarily for like the rest of the world in some way. So I'm not really
Right.
surprised that you
Ah, yeah,
haven't
yeah,
heard
yeah.
it
Yeah.
because yeah, we have a
Well,
lot of
because
stuff
we
to deal
heard
with.
Trump's message, all over the place. So I'm like, oh, that's too bad we didn't hear Biden. Anyway, yeah, let's move on from
I
the
know.
politics. But
Yeah.
the idea is like, yeah, once you found your three-word rebellion, obviously you have to communicate it and it
Yes.
should explain itself, but you need to also give context and say, if I
Yes.
talk about the gentle business revolution, people go, huh? The other thing
What
I
is
kind of
that?
added into is it's kind of this paradox. It's like, how can a revolution be gentle? So it gets people to go,
Mhm.
huh? And then you need to explain. And
Yes,
and
and
so that's the
that's
communication part, right?
yeah, and that's exactly what a good three-word rebellion does. It gets people's attention and makes them go like, "Oh, well what is that? And what would a gentle business revolution look like in my business?"
Hmm.
And then I think that takes us to the next piece of messaging we all have to have is understanding that client journey. Like, what are the conversations we need to create around our three-word rebellion to get people to buy in, to get people to raise their hand and say like, "Ooh, yes, I'm interested," or to come over and join our email communities or wherever we're building community in our
Hmm.
business. And if you don't know how to communicate that, like if you didn't have a follow up to like, "Oh, well, what is that?" and you're like stumbled for 10 minutes trying to explain what it is, then it's not going to be as effective. So I always say like a 3-word rebellion is awesome for getting attention. It's awesome for having this memorable message you can be known for, but then you have to have the supporting messages that take people on a journey to buy in to this message and to your business. So I mean, that's essentially persuasion, right? But that's what needs to happen next.
Yeah, because otherwise you're just stuck at the beginning and people are like craving for more, but they don't know where to go next.
Yeah, they don't know what to say. Because I even faced that when I first came up with the 3-word rebellion idea, and I finally landed on that phrase. I'm like, this is awesome. How do I explain it to people? That was literally the next problem that I came up against. And that's why when I do messaging work, I do that client journey piece with people, because it's critical in order to get people to buy in.
Yeah. And do you also, I recently had a guest on who talked about the kind of the previous experience of the client, meaning what have they experienced before? What is their backstory that they are now, like, for example, in gentle marketing, well, it's exactly the bro marketing, right? People have
Yes.
experienced that. They're like, I'm done with that. I want something else. Is that also
Mhm.
work that you do with your clients to kind of figure out, well, why are they attracted to my 3-word rebellion?
Yeah. So, what I know about my clients, it's so interesting. So, I just did a bunch of client research, like having my clients, my favorite clients interviewed. And what I found out is like all of them had business coaches before, all of them have been like in masterminds or bought into programs, and it didn't work for them or their business.
Mhm.
And part of the reason was the tactics that they were being taught, the bro marketing stuff, because bro marketing essentially like how we use psychological triggers like scarcity, authority, and social proof to shut down critical thinking and manipulate people into a buying decision, because we overwhelm them and we don't let them think and we pour on the fear. And my clients just don't resonate with that. So when I do work with them, we look at like, yeah, well, who are your people? Like, I am not a fan of like the ideal client avatar that you just kind of make up and pull out of your butt. um, I'm really this fan of being like, well, of your clients, like they're real people. What did you love about working with them? Like, what was their experience? And bringing that into the work, because I think you have to acknowledge that, like where they are, what they're struggling with, and acknowledging it with like empathy and compassion versus like poking at pain points, which is what bro marketers teach you to do.
Yeah, so let's hear you rant about bro marketing.
Oh my gosh. I always go back to the moment I first found out about online business, and I signed up for this 3-part video series. And my background is I'm an academic. I taught persuasion for 5, 6 years at the collegiate level. And I remember watching the first video, and the guy was saying, well, if you have to establish your authority, but if you don't have authority, don't worry about it. Just tell this rags to riches story and manufacture your authority. And I'm like, what did he just say? Like, what is this? And I realized, like, I'm like, oh, I was like, everything that I taught my persuasion students is now being weaponized in online business. In fact, Robert Cialdini in his book Influence calls them the weapons of influence. But I feel like the bro marketers just went in and took his book and were like, weapons of influence sounds good to me,
Yeah,
and
yeah, they're
started
like, hoo-hoo,
using
cool.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I was shocked and dismayed, and I also got sucked into it because it is presented as the way you build your business. It's presented as the way you market. And for most of us, that doesn't feel good. And it's not in alignment with like using these like fear-based and guilt-laden turns of phrase to get people to buy. I'm like, that's just blah. And also I knew from my corporate background, I didn't see Microsoft or General Mills or any of the big companies that I was worked with in the past, like, I didn't see them use these tactics. I'm like, "We're using the tactics of, like, timeshare salesmen in this industry."
Mm.
And I always, like, I think the first time I talked about bro marketing was 2015. The market was not ready to hear about it yet. There were some people who were like, "Yeah, I agree, that's not great." But selling that kind of alternative way, they just weren't open to it. And I finally think this year we've gotten to this critical point where people are now actively seeking because they've tried that way and it worked somewhat, or maybe it didn't work at all because it actually shut you down from sharing your message and putting your work out into the world. But especially after well, we're still in coronavirus.
Yeah.
But I do think we're looking for a more gentle, a more nurturing, a relationship way of building. And not everyone, but I think we're seeing more and more people, you know, turn to that. And I still see, like, I did a bro marketing overthrow workshop where we were going to develop your ethical principles. Like, that was the goal of the course, was to, like, let's develop your ethical principles that you can apply to your marketing. And that was really hard to sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
It's like, why are you teaching me ethics? Oh no, I'm already, yeah,
I
it's
know.
just like people, but I think I agree with you. Times are changing, and I think coming out of this virus, coming, the US coming out of what you're coming out of. It's like people are just done with lies and trickery and
And
yeah, all this
over
kind of over,
promises.
yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I'm just so glad to hear that you also say that you got pulled into it, because that's what I always feel like. I'm like, yeah, it's almost like that's what we were told to do. And then so we're like, well, I'm running an online business, so I guess that's the way it works. I did
Yeah.
always
Well,
try to personalize and kind of, do it my way, but still, yeah, it's just a lot of the stuff is just like that. This is how it's done.
yeah, and it
Mm.
is very much presented that way. Like, this is the only way to build your business.
Right.
And even when somebody like me, who knows better, who's had different experiences, when you see, people teaching it and they're like some of the biggest names in the industry, then you're like, well, I guess I have to do it this way.
Yeah.
And you don't stop to think like, no, no, I don't. Like, those online entrepreneurs, celebrity business coaches, they don't give you permission to say like, oh yeah, well, there's a lot of different ways to do this. This is one way, you can adapt it. I'm happy to help you adapt. They're like, nope, this is my course. You do it, and if you don't get results, it's your fault. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
it's always your fault. It's
it's
like you
always your
didn't
fault.
didn't do it right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, no, so with you. And even though we're saying, yeah, now people are kind of looking for a different way, you're the first person still that I hear, just like me, talking about this and say, look, you don't have to do it the way that people still to this day are telling you to do it. And it takes a lot of courage for you to, show up and teach that, because yeah, like you just said, that the course on ethics, it didn't sell well. Well, why? Because people still want the hype stuff. They want, instant results. And we know that
Yes.
ethics, people are like, is that gonna work? Is that gonna give me, instant results?
Yeah,
So
and it was interesting, one of the questions when I did teach it, because I sold a decent amount of spots because I have been cultivating this anti-bro marketing stance for a while, so
mhm,
it did okay, right? It was harder to sell than I thought, but even once, we're in the course, they're like, "But can you really make money doing this?"
mm,
And I'm like,
yeah,
"Oh, here we go." Because the great thing about bro marketing is it works, it's effective, you can make fast cash,
mhm,
and the alternative where you're applying ethics and thinking about your message and taking people on this journey, like, it's a lot more work up front and the results are slower to build over time, but it's worth it because you end up with clients who are better fits for you. They are more loyal, they're more committed to the work that they're doing with you than this like fast cash grab that I think at the end of the day, even though people don't talk about it in the online world, like it actually does brand damage when somebody takes a course or a program and they don't get a result or they realize like, oh, this isn't for me, like a halfway into it, like that damages your brand in the long term.
Usually these big courses or gurus that sell this online thing, they have like their poster childs, they have these really amazing testimonials, and then
Mhm.
they sell you the thing as if you were gonna, get the same results as they do. And then people are so shamed into believing that, because they didn't get the same results as poster child, they won't even speak up and say, look, it doesn't work for me. So they just wasted all this money, not daring to say, look, program didn't work for me, because they're like, well, it works for the poster child. So it's probably me.
Oh,
So,
yeah. And
again,
I mean,
back
I
to
think
that
I think you're speaking to like how unregulated the industry is.
as well.
Because like if you think about, especially in the United States, like the weight loss industry, it's
Mm,
highly regulated. When you show testimonials or before and afters, it's always with the caveat, these results aren't typical, everybody's a little bit different. And so
I
you
didn't know
kind of
that. So legally, you have to like put some disclaimers and stuff.
yeah.
Mm,
And we don't do that in the online business
no.
world. And I've even seen testimonials on sales pages for courses that actually came from the person who was in like their $20,000 mastermind,
Right, right, right.
but it's made to seem like, oh, they got the result from this course. And that's not true.
Yeah, so basically they take the $1,000 course, and you see that testimonial, but that was actually a one-on-one client who paid
Mm-hmm.
$20,000. But
Yep.
yeah, we've seen it all. We've seen it
Mm-hmm.
all.
Yes. And
So
it's
so
frustrating.
it is, yeah, it really is. And so you also talk about, empathy and kind of slowing it down, and yeah, what else do you suggest to clients who are like, okay, hook me up, let's do this different way. What are the changes that you are suggesting to switch to a gentler approach?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing I always recommend people doing is getting really grounded in your values and your principles, like understanding like what your ethical principles are and being able to filter your marketing and purchase decisions through those. And then really what it comes down to is bro marketing is a very specific type of messaging, right? It's the psychological hacks, it's write your copy this way, here's some templates, here's some swipes. But if you're going an alternative way, it comes down to creating a different kind of message that gets people's attention and creates conversation that actually like builds an argument for your work and why people should want to work with you. Like why this is the best thing. Like if you're in this situation, I get it. I see it. This is the reason I think you're in that situation, usually some outside force, and be like, and here's the way forward and why it's the right path if you're in this situation. So I mean, it's a way different type of messaging than what you're taught with pro marketing, but it makes a huge difference because you're really, at the end of the day, advocating your work to the right people so that they see themselves and it makes sense to invest. And if it doesn't make sense, then they won't invest. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing because it's not right for them. So, really, it's about like, okay, how do I make an argument for my work that really speaks to the right people so that they can see how this benefits them? So, I mean, it's a radically different way of messaging and it's Like I was working, well, she ended up becoming my client and I was, going through her sales page with her and I was like, "Okay, you're against diet culture. Great. So you can acknowledge their day-to-day life and then say this is all a result of diet culture and you've been indoctrinated into this. And then how do we get out of that?" And that's like your program, your solution. And she was just like, "Oh, I've never thought about it that way." I'm
It's a
like,
rebellion
"Mhm."
again, right? It's a
Yeah,
rebellion against the diet culture.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, and so it's amazing, like, it's like there are a lot of people who are rebelling against the status quo, but they don't see how to communicate about that.
Mm. Yeah. What came up for me is that it takes responsibility and it takes maybe a little bit, deeper work because you're not just gonna buy a template and, spam all your LinkedIn connections with your pitch
No.
and copy paste. It really takes some deep thinking, and I think, again, I'm a little bit into astrology, and we're heading into, or we're already in the age of Aquarius, and
Yes.
Aquarius is all about, taking responsibility and becoming adults and thinking for ourselves. And I think the
Mhm.
last, 10, 15 years, we've been almost told to not think for ourselves anymore, right?
Yeah,
How do
I
we
feel
get
like a
that
big
far?
solution to bro marketing and what we're seeing in the online world, and even just as a consumer of business products or courses, like you need to think. You need to
Yeah.
think for yourself and develop your critical thinking skills. And when you see a testimonial, instead of being like, "Wow, that's an amazing result. I would like that result," be like, "All right, what's this person's backstory? I'm going to Google them and find out." Like I have done this before, and just going to that deeper level where you're critically evaluating
Hmm.
and allowing yourself, as Adam Grant would say, to rethink things. Like you're like, "Oh, I think this program might be great for me." And then it's like, but like let's check this out a little bit deeper. So really it is, yeah, it's about thinking for yourself and helping people, like through our marketing, really helping people make decisions about like if you're the right person for them, if they have the problem that you solve, if you have the right process for them so that they can decide at each step of the way whether this is the right thing for them. And I think that is so much more powerful than just being like, "Okay, I'm going to use scarcity and lots of social proof and disappearing bonuses and countdown timers to like really ratchet up that FOMO and make you feel bad about yourself. Like if you don't take this, your business is going to fail." And it's like, "Oh, no, let's not do that anymore."
It almost feels like, you know, consciousness of people has risen, and marketing hasn't kept up with it. Like we're still treating people as idiots, like, 15 years ago when there wasn't any access to internet, and we're, telling them all these lies and things, and without respecting them as independent thinkers. And so I think
Mhm.
that's what you and I are saying. It's like, treat them with empathy, treat them with respect, treat them as independent thinkers. That's the only way that they're going to make an informed decision, and they're going to be the right clients for you as well.
Yes, exactly. Because, I mean, one of the things we don't talk about is in those big programs, those courses, we don't talk about the default rate or actually how many people complete everything. And it's shocking. I actually was listening to your episode with Tad Hargrave and how he was talking about like everybody running to the back of the room and you see like, "Oh man, like they made so much money this day
Right.
today." And then like 90% of those people like ask for a refund within 24 hours. And I'm
Yeah.
like, because then all of a sudden they had time to think about their decision and
Yeah.
realize that
And
that
nobody
wasn't the right
shares those
thing.
numbers, refund numbers online, right? Yeah.
Mm-mm,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
no. And I think, that's why bro marketing looks sexy because you're like, "Oh my gosh, look at all the money they're making." But we don't talk about like, all right, how many people are completing your course, getting results? What's your refund rate?
And the other thing we don't talk about is that they have to keep hustling. because these
Mhm.
are not referral clients. They're not people who come back over and over again. So this poor bro marketer, he has to keep doing that hustle for as long as he wants to be in business. Because the
Yeah.
minute
Gotta
he
fill it.
stops, that's it. There's
Mhm. Yep.
no more clients. Yeah. We could go on and on and on.
I know, I know. I'm like, "Oh, we could talk another hour about this."
But I want you to kind of share some last words of wisdom where, yeah, what would you recommend to someone who's like maybe fallen into the trap of bro marketing? How do you switch? Because that, I think, is always the tricky thing, is like, okay, admit to yourself. Like I had to really admit to myself, like, I can no longer do this. There's just so many things that don't work for me anymore. But then the transition, how do you start that transition?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to show a lot of compassion and grace to yourself. Like,
Mm,
yep, I'm marketed this way. Yes, it caused some harm. And I'm sorry. I feel contrite about that. And then it's starting to look at a way of doing better. Like, okay. And realize like you don't have to change everything overnight. I think
mm,
that's the mistake a lot of people do. They're like, I'm going to change it all. And then all of a sudden everything stops working in their business. And it's like,
mm.
no, 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 no. Go slow. Like take care of like the
One thing at
easiest
a time.
pieces.
Yeah.
And, and, and also like I might as well just shout this out. Like I have like a training about the alternative to bro marketing. That's free. It's on demand. It's at bro.marketing. I
Awesome.
can't believe I got that URL. But it really grounds you in like what is bro marketing? How do we process persuasive communication? And what's the alternative way of doing this? And takes you into a deep dive of that for about 30 minutes. So you can start thinking about your marketing and your message differently. So that's another good resource if you really want to get these kind of tactics out of your business. But I think the most important part, grace, compassion, and you don't have to do it overnight.
Yeah, I agree. That's also in the last chapter of my book. It's like, don't just throw everything out and think you have to like change everything within a couple of weeks. It doesn't work like
No.
that, because then we're not financially safe anymore, and that adds a lot of stress to a business owner. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and really just I mean, it is and sometimes it's just small tweaks. Like,
Hmm.
you don't have to throw it all out, you just have to tweak it a little
That,
bit
that's
to make
that's
it in
right.
alignment.
And sometimes that's hard to explain when people ask me, so what is gentle marketing? Give me, the 7 steps. I'm like, it's not about 7 steps. It's about making small changes and really talking with empathy and bringing that into your copy. So I'm glad you agree
Yeah.
with that.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's so funny because people will say like, "Well, do you have a checklist for ethical marketing?" And I'm like, "No."
That's
Yeah,
just
it's
it. There it is.
I know. Step 1, define your values. Step 2, define your ethical principles. Apply. There's my 3 steps for you.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's just not well, and I think bro marketers have done a good job of just setting it up where like everything has to be like this cookie cutter. Here are the 7 steps. Here's exactly what you need to do. And business is a lot messier than that. Marketing is a lot messier. Messaging is messier than that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think they've done a disservice in kind of dumbing down how to build a business into these like simple steps that anyone can do. It's like,
Mm.
no.
Yeah. Let's hope that, as we go along, that's not what people want anymore. Because I just like, I have a feeling that there's still a lot of people who want that. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
how can I tell them about a different way of marketing, even without giving them the 7 steps or the cookie cutter approach, right?
Mhm.
It's a
And I
deeper
think part of it
conversation.
is they have to make their own mistakes and be ready for
Mm,
it.
I think so too. It's all about timing. Yeah.
Mhm. That's how it was for me.
Yes. Yeah, you have to really be wake up and say, I can't do this anymore. Like, what was I doing?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow, this has been amazing. Thanks so much, Michelle. Do share with people again also your main website and the name of your book so they can
Yeah,
look it
so
up.
you can come visit me at drmichellemazur.com, and my book is available on Amazon and Book Depository and lots of other places, and that's called The Three-Word Rebellion, and I
Wonderful.
invite you to check it out.
And the other link was bro.marketing. Marketing
Nope.
is the extension.
Yeah,
Okay.
bro.marketing. I was like, "Oh,
Awesome.
that's such a great URL."
It is. It's amazing. So congrats for that. I always ask one last question, Michelle, and that's what are you grateful for today or this week?
Well, I'm grateful for this conversation. I'm also grateful that our governor announced that everyone in our state will be eligible for vaccines on April 15th. That's very
Yay.
exciting. I'm hitting the pandemic wall, so I'm like, yes, hope. There's
Finally,
hope.
restaurants.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So I'm really grateful. And I'm grateful that I've been healthy through
Mm,
all of this in the past year because I've seen firsthand some of the devastation that has
mm,
been wreaked because of the pandemic. So I
mm.
am grateful for my health and the health of my husband.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us for this awesome conversation. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Thanks so much for watching until the very end. If you haven't subscribed yet, click on that subscribe button so that you're informed whenever I release a new episode here on the YouTube channel. Also, if you're new here and you don't have your one-page marketing plan yet, make sure you subscribe at sarahsandacroce.com/one page, the number one, and then page to download your one-page marketing plan that takes you through this journey of a gentler approach to marketing. So it comes with an email series that takes you through the 7 Ps and really offers some deep reflections about these different kind of Ps, the gentler way to market. So again, sarahsandacroce.com/one page. Thanks so much and see you next time.